All right, thank you guys so much for stopping by. A question I've been really posing to myself lately is a purpose-driven rifle versus a general purpose rifle. And today I brought on a very special guest, a friend of mine, James Ferguson from XMTG, to have this conversation with me. So James, welcome to the channel. With that being said, guys, I want to just dive right into the topic, and that is going to be GPRs, which this guy is the abomination, as some people have called it on the internet, 12.5, kind of do-it-all rifle versus the purpose-driven rifle. And James, I think your background's pretty important, and how we met's important. So you want to just kind of give everybody really quickly your background, where you come from, where your experience is from?
Sure. So I spent 30 years in law enforcement. Prior to law enforcement, I was in the Marine Corps for a little while. In my law enforcement career, I spent 24 years on SWAT, 23 years as an operational sniper. And the way our team was structured is we're a part-time team. So we had other jobs in the department as well. And during that stint, I was our full-time range master for 10 years. So I was responsible for all firearms training conducted in our department. And our department size was about 240 officers. And so because of that, I've got to travel across the United States and train at various locations, bring that information back to my agency and implement those programs for my agency. And so all of those things that I've learned during my time in the Marine Corps, my time in police work, and all of the firearms training courses that I went to, the instructor certifications and things like that, I put together to create classes for our business that we teach civilian and law enforcement firearms training. We do a lot of precision rifle work, whether that's bolt gun or gas gun, and then carbine work and handgun stuff.
Okay, great. So thanks for that background. Obviously, I've done several of your courses, several private lessons. We've had some clients come out to the range and got a really great world-class facility up there right outside of Dallas. So if you guys are in the area or if you want to travel to it, it's very convenient to get to. And we got targets from 0 out to 1,300 yards, if I'm not mistaken. And then you have a tack bay, full turf tack bay, where you can do all the pistol work and all the fast, high-speed stuff your heart desires. But with that being said, let's just kind of dive into the topic. With your background, what is your stance on general purpose rifle versus a specialized rifle, or building a rifle for one purpose or one role? Where do you land on that in general?
All right, so everybody needs to keep in mind that these are my opinions that were formed over my experiences in my career. And if you have something different, that doesn't mean yours is wrong. And so I think the first thing that you've got to ask yourself is, what is your goal? What is your goal of your build? And for me, I want a general purpose rifle. I have done entry work with a 10-3. With red dot on it. I've done entry work with a 16-inch rifle with iron sights. I've also done entry work with a 16-inch with an LPVO on it. And so for me, if now that I don't do that type of work anymore, I want a rifle that I can push into service to do whatever the mission might be that I have to accomplish, whether it's protecting my family or engaging a target at 600 plus.
Yeah. And we're going to get into more of like the scenarios or civilian versus law enforcement. I have a few questions I wrote down. So I want to get into more of the nitty gritty specifics, but I did just want to touch on kind of the high points right now. So again, to humor some of the trolls out there in the internet, or I don't want to call them trolls, just people who have different opinions, right? The critic might say a jack of all trades is a master of none. So if you want to build one rifle, like you mentioned, because sounds like you kind of lean towards maximizing a rifle's capabilities, how do you respond to somebody who's saying, well, if you only are going to have, while the country's still standing, while there's still law enforcement, there's no shit hit the fan scenario, why not build a rifle to fit the task that's going to be 99% of the time what you're going to need it for, which is personal defense, and that's going to probably be 15, 20 yards maximum and in?
Well, you have to ask the question, like you can ask the question of, if that's your mindset, why do you think SWAT teams train for more than one task. Like most SWAT teams, their primary job is going to be hazardous warrant execution. But they train other things in that. They train vehicle takedowns, they train hostage rescue, because if that situation were to arise in their area of operation, they're expected to be able to handle that and have the tools to go and do that. And so if you have that mindset of I'm only going to equip my rifle to do the 99%, what are you going to do when the 1% happens? So I can take one of my rifles that is like, let's just look at this one here. So I've got a 16-inch with a Night Force ATACR 1-8 and a Steiner MPS here on top. I can take this rifle and I can do entry work with it, even with a can on it. It's going to be pretty long, but I can do entry work with it. I can shoot out to 800 with it, but I also can use it to defend my home as well. So versus if I've got just a 10-3 here, which I love this setup. This is a type of rifle that I used a lot of my career. The last part of my career was a 10-3. And it does entry work better than my general purpose rifle. But 300 yards with this red dot is probably going to be about it. I have no magnifier. If I put an LPVO on there, I could get it a little farther. And so everything is a trade-off. And the question that you got to ask yourself is, what do you want to accomplish? And for me personally, I want to have a rifle that can do any task I ask it to do.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, a big criticism of the type of background you come from is that, well, you are now a civilian, but what all your experiences are on the law enforcement side. So again, playing the devil's advocate here, can you how do you think that it translates to the civilian world, your experiences in law enforcement? Does it translate at all, or is it a completely different mindset that a civilian should have, or do you think it's irrelevant?
I think it translates very well. You know, police work is just a microcosm of society. And people that get into that line of work, unfortunately, have to experience the worst of society, and they get to see what humanity can do to each other. And so they have the tools to deal with that. Why should you not have the tools to deal with that? Hopefully you go through your entire life and you never have to use your weapon to save yourself or your family member. But another thought to think about is, like, our country is fairly young, right? We're not even 300 years old. So if you look at all the countries that are older than us, how many of them have been invaded? How many of them have fallen? How many of the governments were oppressive to the people? And so what makes you think that all of those things that have occurred in history across the globe could never happen here? So
Yeah,
those are the
I like to
questions that
say
you need to answer.
100%. I like to say you're either intelligent or you trust the government. That's my humble opinion. But if you just look at history, if you study history, you're absolutely right. Modern day Rome was modern day democracy back in the day. No one ever thought it could be turned into a dictatorship and then eventually overthrown. And obviously, no one pray to God that never happens. But that's the whole point of having the Second Amendment. That's what the founders intended. Was it's great for home defense. It's great for hunting. It's great for all the sport shooting that we do. But it's really to defend freedom from tyranny, foreign or domestic. And that's what I kind of gear all my rifle setups to do, exactly as you mentioned, because this is a setup for, if I could just choose one rifle to train with everything, I want to be proficient with it and I want to be able to do the maximum amount of tasks. Although I do, just to kind of flag my stance on this, I do believe that you should kind of gear it back towards that 80% as much as possible and ensure that it is plenty capable in that 80%. But again, to say that you may never need it for a shit hit the fan without rule of law, we see it happen during natural disasters all the time. And unfortunately, with like Hurricane Katrina, police and law enforcement, we're going door to door and confiscating weapons. And again, terrible situation, but we see it happening even when the whole country hasn't fallen or there's not some massive catastrophic event. So I think that's really important. Let's see here. What do we got? Okay. Let's talk about real quick, because I think it's really cool, and I would like to nerd out, being that you were in law enforcement for so long and in SWAT for so long. How did your career start? What types of weapons platforms? What type of optics? What type of weapon mounted lights? Because we all see the old pictures of like the MP5s with like the giant, mag light
Yeah.
tape to it and stuff like that. What kind of setups were you running early on in your career? How did it evolve, and how does your last several years in law enforcement compare to what people are doing now?
Weapons then were, so this was 1991, were totally different at my agency. And just keep in mind, other agencies may have had some different type of weapons, but the rifles we were running were Colt 6920s or earlier variants of the Colt 6920. And I did not have a weapon mounted light for years. We ended up having to had a hostage situation and ended up clearing the structure after they came out. The bad guy surrendered, and I had a Streamlight SL20 that I would have to hold underneath the rifle, underneath the forend to clear. And we were issued on the team MP5s, and our MP5s had Surefire forends on them with weapon-mounted lights, where you had pressure pads with a constant on or momentary. And so that was kind of the way everything was in the beginning. We didn't even have weapon-mounted lights on our handguns, which is crazy to think about now. But things started to slowly progress. And then you saw a lot of aim points come out. So like really my first experience with an optic on a work rifle, I had a Colt 6920 with a 4-power Colt scope on top of the carry handle. And so that put that optic up around that, 190 height or somewhere in that range. And it was very difficult to shoot accurate with the whole groups because you couldn't get a cheek weld. You were getting a jaw weld. You got any comment on that? Or you want me to keep going to where we are today?
Yeah, I mean, no, keep going. I think this is great because you see it. Like I said, I mean, my only reference point to this stuff is like old movies, right? Because you see it in old movies, and not that Hollywood is a great representation of what a legit setup should look like. Because even if you look at them now, they've gotten much better at having more accurate rifle setups and clone correct, so to speak. But I think that's super interesting. Obviously, I was born in '93, so I wasn't even around when you started doing this stuff. So it's just, I think it's a cool piece of history. So how did it evolve from there?
So we started getting some Colt Commandos on the team. And eventually Colt Commandos ended up replacing all MP5s. And
What's a Colt Commando?
So at the time, we called everything a Colt Commando. It was a 11.5-inch Colt select fire. So you had safe, semi, and full auto. And I don't remember if it had the designation commando on it or not. But
it was 11.5-inch.
Yeah, it was 11.5-inch, and we called those commandos. We eventually got I can't remember the designation for the Colts, but they were the 10-3s that had the quad rail with the flip up front sight built on the gas block. And so we ended up issuing those to the entire team with Trigicon MROs. And then we had a few iterations of lights on there that one of them didn't work out very well. And then we ended up with Streamlight lights on our rifles. And those were issued to everybody. And that's the weapon systems we were running when I retired. We didn't have lasers on them. We had night vision, but we didn't do night vision ops because everything we did was white light. And now the team they replaced those with semi-auto Daniel Defense. I believe they're 10.3s. I think they've got EOTechs, and they've got some EOTech laser devices, and everybody on the team has night vision.
Yeah, the OGL, the new EOTech OGL, which is unobtainium for civilians, but apparently they're out there for law enforcement. But hopefully they'll come to the civilian market soon because they look cool. I've never actually used one, but I heard good things. That's really interesting, the background. But now getting it back into the modern day conversation, you are a civilian now. So talking from a civilian perspective, I guess the question is, do you believe that it's overkill? Like, where do you draw a line? What is your go-to general purpose rifle? And is it overkill to have all this stuff on one gun? And if you had to choose just one GPR, what would it be?
So if I had to choose one, it would be my LaRue 5.56, 16-inch. It's got their stealth upper on it. It's a Night Force 2.5 to 20 with a Trimmer 3 reticle. I've got a Vortex Defender mounted at a 35-degree offset, a Stream Light ProTac light, Gemtech Halo suppressor, and a Magpul bipod. This would be my go-to rifle. And so I do entry work with the Vortex red dot on the side. And then more importantly, as far as engaging targets at distance, it's mainly about PID, positive identification. So that's what the glass is going to be used for. Is you need to, whatever your scenario is, you need to make sure you're engaging the right target. And that's where red dots are lacking if you're using it to shoot at distance. You know, if I was just going to do CQB work and I knew that's all I was going to do, I would have a 10-3 with a red dot and a light on it. And that would be my setup. But I don't know I'm going to do that. And fortunately, fortunately, I can have more than one rifle. And I do training for a living, which allows me to have more rifles than most people can allow in their budget. But if you can only have one rifle, in the end, you need to pick what you feel the most comfortable with and what you're going to go and train with. You can push a red dot out to 300 if you spend time on the range. But I think the big problem is most people just do not spend enough time training.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Obviously, I'm a huge proponent of training. That's why I like to have guys like yourself on, not only to share some knowledge, but also to promote your own training companies. I've been through your course. We're doing another course coming up here in the summer, and I'm really excited for that. And it's taught me a lot about myself and my equipment and the capabilities. Usually it's not the equipment that's lacking. Usually, again, it's the shooter. But what I like to say, and something I think is very important to stress, is that these are all tools, right? And so
Correct.
When you train with said tools, or you have multiple tools, right? The training is the same thing as having multiple rifles. Having multiple rifles with multiple capabilities is the same as having multiple skill sets, whether that be close-up work, pistol work, long-range work, or anything in between. And then if you have the tools and you have the skills, the scenario doesn't even matter at that point, because you can apply those skills and those tools to whatever scenario comes your way. Now, I guess, again, the topic is mostly centered around keeping, picking one gun in which to invest most of your time and your money into, because ammo is really expensive and time is, you never have enough time in the day. So which one are you going to take to the range? Which one are you going to prioritize to get familiar with? That's kind of where I'm coming from, because again, I keep hearing in the comment section, range day, bro, why are you setting up this heavy rifle to be able to do the 10% that you're most likely never going to have to do, hopefully never have to do, when most likely scenario is somebody kicks in your door or you're in your vehicle, somebody pulls a gun, whatever that is, right? Again, talking scenario talk, it's going to be within a short distance. And my argument is, if the difference between a GPR being able to reach out to 600 yards with this gun and switching this gun up and putting a red dot on it, and my splits up close where the red dot excels and where people are saying that 90% of your engagements are going to happen, if the difference is so minor that it's almost a statistical anomaly, right? Like if I'm standing at 10 yards and I do a build drill with my attacker on the 1X, and then I do the same thing with an EOTech, if the EOTech is 0.5 seconds faster, is that really enough of a difference to justify getting rid of an entire capability just to have that 0.25 seconds? And that's the question that I've gone over and over in my head. And I mean, I've come to the conclusion that it's not. I would rather have, like you said, you don't know what you're going to run into in any of these scenarios. Police, law enforcement, civilian, shit hit the fan, foreign army on our soil, whatever the scenario is, you don't know, and you don't get to choose. The bad guy gets to choose, right?
Correct.
So why not have the ability to glass out, identify targets, and engage with targets effectively out the distance? And maybe I'm giving up half of a second on a build drill, but to me, that's a fair trade-off in the grand scheme of things to have the capabilities with this rifle. Think
about this build drill. That's 6 rounds, right? Is a target going to be static that you're shooting at? If it's a self-defense situation, are they going to stand there for 6 rounds coming in?
Not. No.
So if it's 200th of a second faster or slower, is it going to matter? No, it's not going to matter. And to put this in perspective, let's say you're never going to engage anything over 25 yards. If you've got to take a hostage rescue shot with your, let's say your family member in your house at 11 yards, do you want a red dot or would you like to have a little magnification?
Yeah,
I
I
would
mean,
like
if
to
they're
have,
barricaded up, yeah, I'd like to
I'd
have some
like to have a little
magnification.
magnification, right? Can you do it
Yeah.
with the red dot? Yeah,
Well,
I
most people don't know
could
what
do it
their
with the red dot.
holdover is at that distance, right? That's why we train that in your scope carbine course. Holdover is at different distances. If your rifle's zero for 100 yards, where are you hitting it? 5 yards, 10 yards, 25, 50, so on and so
And the
forth. That's really important.
same things with the red dot. Most people don't know what their holdovers are. So there is way more application for an LPVO up close and personal than most people think there is. And so,
Of
like in
course.
the LPVO class, there's drills. We do drills where you shoot these drills on zero magnification, and then you're free to shoot it on whatever power you want. And guess what? Everybody does after they shoot these drills on one power. The next time they run it, because the results was not what they wanted, they're running that power up to 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there to take the shot.
Yeah, and that brings up a good topic too, because this is something I struggle with as a civilian, right? You could study scenarios till you're blue in the face, study battles that have happened in the past, but what is a typical engagement distance during your time in law enforcement? What were your typical engagement distances? And then after you answer that, let's talk about what do you believe a good, or I guess a relatively common engagement distance would be if a shit hit the fan scenario or some of those scenarios happen.
I'll say, okay, so in police work, all of the shootings that I have been around, I'm just guessing 25 and in. We may have had one that hit the 35-yard mark. But then if you look at statistics from the American Sniper Association, where the average law enforcement sniper shot is 59 yards, 90% of the engagements are under 200, with the farthest being 590 and some change, close to 600. All right, so if you just go off those statistics alone, that really are the only statistics out there that I'm aware of law enforcement engagements, because contrary to belief, the FBI really does not track all these statistics that people think they track. For years, they thought the FBI tracked sniper-related engagements, and they don't. So if we're just going off of that data from the ASA, American Sniper Association, if you're doing your self-defense training 600 and in, you're probably going to be ready for just about anything that comes your way.
Yeah. And so wouldn't that be more of an argument though against the GPR and more so angled towards the SPR? I guess, okay, so that's in a civilized society, you're a police law enforcement agent. So, but I'll even argue right there, and you can confirm or deny this, on those shots that are even 25 yards in, those sniper shots that either yourself or your teammates had to take, were you on magnification?
So some shots that I know about, yeah, there was some magnification. There's a few that LPVOs are utilized in just here recently. And one was a 1-6, the other was a 1-8. And the 1-6 was on, if I remember right, I think he was on one power. The 1-8 was somewhere in the middle of the power range. He turned the power ring until he could see what he wanted to see. And so those are two statistics that I know of that I've got some concrete data on. I know of another engagement that was on 4 power at 11 yards. And then the other sniper engagements just from the ASA, I can't tell you what the magnification was of the engagements from there.
Yeah, but of course, in a hostage situation, like you mentioned, even at 25 yards, you got a tripod and you have the glass, you'd prefer to dial up than to be on 1X, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I definitely would.
I'm going to dial up to 6, 7, 8 power, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Just depending on how stable the position is.
Yeah, and I've been criticized in the past for being a magnification whore. Forgive my French, but that's what I am. I'll get as much glass, I'll get as much magnification as I can, and still be able to see the field of view that I want, and be able to spot misses and so on and so forth. But I prefer the highest top end that I can get, typically within reason, especially on an LPVO. If I'm shooting past 100 yards or further, really at 50 yards even, I'm dialing up to 6 or 8. depending on the man size steel that I'm shooting at. And most of the steel I shoot at is a reduced C zone again. So it's not really sexy for YouTube because everyone wants to see you shooting as fast as possible, burn it down. But it's essentially a vital zone within a adult male, 8 inches by 14 inches across. So I like to train on those smaller targets to hold myself to a higher standard. But also, people don't realize people don't like to be seen either. So in a scenario where shit hits the fan or there's no police or law enforcement presence and you have to defend yourself, if you're shooting against somebody who doesn't want to be shot at, which is everybody, then they're going to expose as little of themselves as possible. And even at 25 yards or 50 yards, that higher power magnification is going to help you not only locate the targets, but then engage them. And there's different advantages, obviously, with all the Christmas tree reticles that are out there now. The Attacker has a great one. I think it's called the DMX reticle. And people don't realize, especially in the shorter barrel platforms, I'm running a 12.5 currently. It's been my go-to now for several months. Switched over from the 14.5, which I believe this is the rifle that I ran in your course, actually, the 14.5 URGI. And it did have the Attacker on it at the time. But especially in the shorter barreled rifles, there is going to be an increased wind factor once you get past 200 yards. The wind's going to really start to affect the round. And something that you talked about that I learned in your course was the cone of fire. And something I've really hit on with people is that even if the barrel is shorter, it does not make the gun less accurate. The gun, if it's a 1 MOA gun at 100 yards, that cone of fire, so to speak, right, the cone in which those rounds are going into, that 1 inch cone, is just going to get 1 inch larger at every 100-yard increment. But what's going to actually change, what's going to affect the bullet more, depending on your muzzle velocity and your barrel length, is going to be the wind, in which case those reticles come into a huge play. And so I've had experience, and again, a lot of people can't really fault them for this because they don't have the experience of trying to shoot out past 100 or 200 yards of their local range. But once you get to 300, 400, 500 yards and beyond, the wind really takes a big toll on even 77 grain OTMs. So without some sort of wind hold, like the ACOG, for instance, is an optic that is extremely notable, right? It's very well known from movies, from the GWAT era. It's got a ton of time, probably way more kills than any other optic potentially that's out there, right? As far as United States military service members. But at the same time, when you try to take the ACOG at a 3X, even though it's crystal clear glass, all this glass is really good nowadays. It used to be the gold standard, but all these other companies have kind of caught up, in my opinion, as far as clarity goes. Not talking about field of view or durability or lightweight, but when I try to shoot a target in this Central Texas wind that we had the other day at 20 miles an hour with 30-mile-an-hour gusts, and I'm holding like off the plate and referencing a tree branch, it's extremely difficult. And you waste a lot of expensive ammo trying to get a hit on a 10 by 10 inch steel plate, which you should easily be able to engage, or at least relatively easily, with something that has wind holds and has a higher magnification range. So you can spot your misses better and then have a reference point to hold on or near the target, right? If a wind hold isn't perfectly in the center of your target, that's fine. You can put it on the top right, or you can kind of bracket it around the target. There's ways you can do it based off what the wind's doing, but that's a big point for me. And I've got a lot of criticisms on that on the channel in the past. And I'd say rightfully so in some aspects, but at the same time, if you watch my videos, you need to understand what I'm gearing these towards. My goal is to accomplish as much as possible with one setup, so that, because when shit hits the fan, you can only grab one. I don't care who you are. You're not going to be dual wielding AR-15. So
no.
If you can only grab
do
one,
that, you're special.
Yeah, exactly. You're probably making grilled cheeses in the middle of the night. So, yeah. But yeah, what's your stance on that perspective?
I agree with you. I'm a huge fan of glass. I'm a huge fan of magnification. And what a lot of people don't understand or they forget about is a magnification is more than likely going to be used for IDing your target, finding your target, gathering intel. So in the police world, police snipers' primary job is to gather intel. And how do they do that? They do that with good glass, whether it's good glass on their rifle or good spotting scopes, high-end spotting scopes, or high-end binos. So I'm kind of with you on, I want a rifle that's going to be equipped to do whatever it is that I need to do. And I think that people get caught up in the what-if scenarios too much. And in the end, they should build a rifle that makes them happy too. You know, if you like a red dot with a magnifier and that's your thing, hey, more power to you. I'm not going to talk bad about it whatsoever. If you want to run a 20-inch gun with a 5 to 25 on it, go ahead. If that's going to be your go-to rifle, go ahead, train with it. So I think that a lot of people just need to take a step back and ask themselves, what is their goal? What are they trying to accomplish? And then move forward with that and ignore everybody else's opinion.
And what you just said is super important because especially even in my position, I get a lot of burnout where I'm just like I just kind of get over the whole conversation. And it's like, man, we're doing the same thing, talking in circles. And I've had people comment on my channel, hey, you need to talk about new things. But if I really want to explore a topic, then I need to get myself entrenched in it and submerge myself in it and really put some thought into it before I can make a good recommendation, because everyone's got a limited budget. And if you're making a purchasing decision based off of my opinion, and again, like you said, this is all just my opinion. I don't know anything. The only thing I know is I know nothing at all. But I have a little bit of time behind glass, a little bit of time behind the trigger, shoot more than most. But at the end of the day, you got to shoot what gets you excited, what makes you want to go shoot, because that's what you're going to train with and that's what you're going to be good with. So if you have an ACOG, and I'm saying ACOGs are obsolete, don't take that as the gospel by any means. Go train with it, because again, it's the thing you have. It's the best gun you have is the gun you have on you. So whatever you have is plenty good, and most likely it's the skill sets that are lacking, and that's what I keep finding. And I get some of the best glass that money can buy, some of the best guns that money can buy, and at the end of the day, I'll go to a PRS match and I'll get torched by a 70-year-old man, with bad knees, and it's not because he's moving quick; it's because he's got the positional work, he's got the right setups, and I mean, let's just kind of pivot and talk about that, because we've done a lot of long range stuff out at your facility, and so I want to kind of quickly touch on a gun I'm reviewing right now. The review is going to drop here very shortly for the HK MR762A4, and that experience I had with that. So this is a precision or a purpose-driven rifle, right? This is a DMR. This was accepted by the Marine Corps, your old buddies over there, to be the SDMR. I don't think it still has the contract, but it had the contract for the Marine Corps to be their SDMR, to bridge the gap, according to the military, from 300 to 600 yards. And I took this thing out to the range. I grouped it. I got about 1 inch or just above 1 inch groups out of 5-round groups. And then I took it to a PRS match, and I got absolutely smoked by dudes with even more specialized rifles. We're talking competition builds. I mean, barrels like truck axes, specialty calibers, 6.5 GT or 6 GT and all this. Calibers I've never even heard of, and 4-ounce triggers. So there's levels to the specialization too, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in a law enforcement or a prepared civilian mindset, this is already a specialized rifle, but it can be used, like you said, if I needed to, for entry work, if it really needed to, right? Yeah. Whereas those 22-inch, 20-pound PRS guns really couldn't be. But I guess there's levels to it, right?
Yeah, there is. It's like, what is the goal? Like, those guys built those guns to go and compete and to win. And just because you go to a competition doesn't mean that you have to spend all that money and get a specialized rifle, just like you did. You had that HK and you've shot it. I think you've even shot that one out at my place. And
I shot the A1 version. This is the new A4, but it's essentially the same gun with a few minor tweaks. But as far as accuracy goes and distance performance, it's essentially the same thing.
So you took that to a competition and you placed second in your division. There's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of people, I think, they go to competitions to win. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that either. And they're going to do whatever they need to do, like buy the equipment, have the 4-ounce trigger, do all of these things that are going to give them a slight edge, so hopefully they can win. But then if you go to a competition just to test your skill set with a gun that you would bet your life or somebody else's life on, there's nothing wrong with that either. And I think everybody in this industry, or a lot of people in this industry, thinks that there's this square box that everybody has to fit into, and everybody doesn't have to fit into it. We're all doing the same thing, and for one reason or another. And everyone in our industry should stick together because we're a small industry.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we all have to work towards the same common goal. I think that the reason I was taking this gun to that competition specifically was because, again, I owe it to my viewers to give them the best review possible, or my best opinion on whether or not it's worth it, because this is an expensive rifle and not everybody gets these things sent to them like I have the blessing to have happen to me. So, and I mean, I put the work in obviously, but it's still I'm living the American dream. So I understand how blessed I am to have this opportunity, but I got to put in the work, and I did miss a lot of hits with really expensive ammo, and that feels like shit. So we're definitely a lot of learning lessons. I know the gun was capable. There was definitely some things that I'm going to talk about in the review on it that I wish HK had done. But for the most part, I was pretty impressed. I still placed second. I know I thought I did horribly in my division, but I was like 35th overall out of 60 people. But again, a lot of those guys, one of them was a world-class PRS, world nationally ranked national champion PRS shooter.
Yeah.
So, and just being in that company, I learned a ton from those guys, and it's a cool experience to test out your equipment in ways that they can get a lot more creative than you can really do in your own mind. Or if you have limited ranges at your local range, you go to one of these matches, and it opens up those possibilities to train further and stuff. So, yeah, man, I really appreciate that insight and you coming on. You just want to tell everybody like where they can find you if they want to sign up for a course, and how they can do that?
Yeah, visit our website at xmtgllc.com. There you can find our training calendar, and you can register for a training course right there. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram is XMTG_. Facebook is XMTG Firearms Training Academy. And you can also watch some content from us on YouTube under XMTG Firearms Training Academy.
Yeah, and if you guys want to see a little bit more of his facility, we do have a video on the channel. Actually, I think we have 2 videos at this point, right? Am I wrong about that? I think
I think so.
We have at least 1, maybe 2. I think we have 2 videos out there at his facility with some drone shots kind of showing you got a really cool container structure that you welded up, multiple stories, all kinds of different improvised shooting position, different windows cut out. So it's kind of like a DMR or sniper or even a scope carbines like paradise to be able to test your equipment. So I highly recommend it. Without further ado, thank you for coming on. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. rangedaybro.com for any merch, discounts page, loadouts page. This guy's up there as well. Make sure you subscribe to our email list, and you guys know how to do the rest. So thank you. Take care.